Kakadosh Boker Tov, we're continuing with the halachot of Netilat Yadayim. We're here in Siman Kuf Nun Che. We were talking about davar shetibulo b'mashke. What happens right now if you dipped something in a liquid, or a liquid was on top of a food and then it got dried up? For example, you rinsed, whether it's going to be fruits or vegetables, and by the time you're going to come to eat it, it gets dry. So you do not need to do Netilat Yadayim. The same halacha would actually even apply if there's going to be a little bit of moisture on it, as long as it's not tofeach al menat le'atpiach. Remember that we learned yesterday the concept of tofeach menat le'atpiach means if you're going to come and you're going to touch this vegetable, and now your hand is going to become a little bit moist, would you come and be able to touch something else? And now that other thing, the third object, would it become wet or not? If it's going to become wet, so that's called tofeach al menat le'atpiach. If it will not become wet, because basically there's not enough liquid or moisture on your hand in order to transfer onwards, so therefore it's tofeach, but it's not al menat le'atpiach, and therefore you do not need netilat yadayim. What happens if you're going to do davar shetibulo b'mashke, but you're not actually touching the mashke, you're not touching the liquid? So if you're going to eat something and you're not going to actually touch it, for example, you're going to dip the rosh hayerek in the liquid and you're grabbing on the other side and you're not touching the water, right? Still, you do need to do netilat yadayim. The same halacha would apply, right? If you're going to eat davar shetibulo b'mashke lidei kaf o mazleg and you're not going to touch at all, not the machal and not the mashke, or your hands are going to be he comes over here, he says they're going to be covered with kfafot, let's say with gloves or with a mapah. Still, it's proper to do netilat yadayim beforehand. And it's only going to be if it's a derech haolam to eat it that way, which means that, for example, you use a knife and a fork or you use a spoon and then you don't touch the liquid at all, then you could be mekel without a problem. Okay, then that's what it's going to be. Then you're going to be mekel. So for example, afterwards he's going to bring down to do with a cereal, right? And they do have what to rely on. So for example, you put cornflakes in milk, right? At the end of the day, you've got cornflakes, you're putting it in milk. Technically, it's davar shetibulo b'mashke, right? So now if you're going to come and take it with your hands, you have a problem. But if you're going to use it with a spoon, so obviously you do have what to rely on, that you're not going to come and you're not going to need to do netilat yadayim. If not, you will need to do netilat yadayim for your cornflakes and milk. Remember that this netilat yadayim is without a bracha, right? But it's just a regular netilat yadayim. What happens now to do with tibulo b'mashke and something which is a mashke mevushal or kavush, where the mashke, the liquid, was cooked or it was going to be pickled? So he says in such a case you still have to do netilat yadayim. There's no difference between whether the mashke is mu'at or if it's going to be tafel or not. As long as you're going to have to do, you still need to do netilat yadayim previously as well. Now he comes and he says, right, and the same thing is pickled. So for example, you've got olives, you've got pickles that were already pickled, right? In such a case, you're going to come and eat olives, you would have to do netilat yadayim because it's davar shetibulo b'mashke. Nevertheless, he says, if you're not going to actually touch the davar mevushal or kavush biyadav, for example, you're going to eat it with a mazleg or with a kaf, you're going to eat it with a fork or a spoon, you could be mekel even lechatechila, and all the more so if derech haolam is to be mekel, right, which means that the derech haolam is to eat it through a spoon or a fork, then for sure you have what to rely on. So here there is the extra leniency that since it's going to be kavush or mevushal, so here even if it's not 100% the normal way of the people to eat it with a fork or a spoon, you could be lenient, and especially if that's the way to eat it with a fork or spoon, then even more so you're allowed to be lenient, right? And that's why we spoke about the cornflakes, right? We're also talking about if you're going to eat less than a kazait, right? He says, right, if you're going to eat less than a kazait of the food which was going to be cooked or pickled in this liquid, even if you're going to be touching with your hands, you do not need to do netilat yadayim, even lechatechila. Now, if you're going to come and you're going to put tea biscuits in your tea or your coffee, right? Or some people, they put croissants, right? They come, they'll put their croissant, they dip it in the tea, and then they come and they'll eat it. So in such a case, he says you do have to do netilat yadayim, even though you're not going to touch the tea or the coffee. But if you're not going to eat a kazait from the tea or the like, for example, from the biscuits or the cake or whatever it is, and you're going to be careful not to touch liquid, then you could be mekel. Or if you're going to use a fork or a spoon, you could also be mekel. These are just some of the halachot. Again, we'll speak about other ones as well, right? But this is just like the main ones of the halachot of davar shetibulo b'mashke, and we continue Bezrat Hashem tomorrow.